Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this webinar. My name is Romola Bucks, and I'm the director of the Raine Study. And this morning, we're going to introduce you to the Raine Study. I'd like to start by acknowledging that the campus of the University of Western Australia, from where this webinar is being broadcast, is situated on Noongar land, and that the Noongar people remain the spiritual and cultural custodians of their land and continue to practice their values, languages, beliefs, and knowledge. Today's speakers are myself, Associate Professor Rebecca Glauert, who's the Scientific Director of the Raine Study, Dr. Juliana Zabatiero, our Scientific Manager, Alex DeVos, our Data and Biosamples Manager, Dragica Penova Veselinovic, our Scientific Support Officer, and Associate Professor Patrick Dunlop from the Future of Work Institute, the School of Business, Curtin University. So welcome, everyone. Just to let you know, we'll be taking questions via the Q&A option in Zoom. So please add your questions and or upvote questions posed by someone else you particularly want to know the answer to, and we will try and get through as many of those as we can before the end of the session. We will also be recording this webinar for later viewing. So, the vision of the Raine Study is to advance knowledge and enhance lives, and our mission is to improve lifelong health and quality of life through groundbreaking, impactful research, particularly that examines influences pathways and outcomes from before birth and throughout life's course. But before we tell you about the Raine Study data, I want to give you a little bit of history, a bit of background. Most of you will have heard of the Raine Medical Research Foundation, and many of you will have confused us, the Raine Study, with the RMRF, but we're quite different beasts. So Mary Bertha Raine, who was born in London in 1877, came to Perth in the early 1900s. She was a very, very successful businesswoman. You may have heard that she owned the Wentworth Hotel at Raine Square. And when she died, she left £1 million, which was about $40 million at the time, following the death of her beloved husband, Arnold Joe Yeldon Raine, in 1957. And he died of heart disease, or atherosclerosis. So when she died, she bequeathed her funds to medical research, and those were used to set up the Raine Medical Research Foundation. And that was to study the origins of disease, particularly heart disease. So back in the late 1980s, John Newnham, Fiona Stanley, Lou Landau, and Con Michael applied to the Raine Medical Research Foundation for a grant to set up a cohort study, a longitudinal cohort study with two key objectives. The first was to develop that study to study the role that early life events from the womb onwards have on later life. The second, to investigate the effects of frequent ultrasound scans during pregnancy. The Raine Medical Research Foundation funded that grant, which was called the West Australian Pregnancy Cohort Study, and later, in recognition of the role of the Raine Medical Research Foundation, was renamed the Raine Study. The second part of their goal, their aims, was funded by an NHMRC study. And between 1989 and 1991, 2,900 women who were 18 weeks pregnant were recruited and followed up until the birth of those children. Half had ultrasounds at 18, 24, 28, 34, and 38 weeks of pregnancy, and the other half had ultrasounds just at 18 weeks. And the idea was to see whether having repeated ultrasounds would affect the health of the developing fetus. It turned out that it was safe to conduct ultrasounds when clinically indicated. And this study set the benchmark for international best practice for ultrasounds. It also helped to define fetal growth expectations. If you're interested, their 1993 paper in The Lancet has been cited more than 500 times. But they also collected extensive data during pregnancy, and then the children were assessed at birth. And the first follow-ups began in 1991. So what I'd like to do now is to hand over to Associate Professor Beck Glauert to tell you more about the Raine Study, the participants we've recruited over the last 30 plus years. Beck.
Thank you, Romola. Hi, everyone. Good morning. So look, the Raine study is an absolutely incredible study. In fact, it's one of the longest running pregnancy cohort studies in the world, and we have it right here in Western Australia. So at the tips of our hands, we have this incredible resource that we're really, really excited to share with you, and we really hope that you get excited about from this webinar. So now, what started as 2 generations, we have 4 generations. So Gen 2, we call them Gen 2, were the participants who were actually born into the study. So their parents recruited them into the study when they were 18 weeks gestation, and they are now about 31 years old, and they have continued to participate in the study over the past 31, 32 years, which is just fantastic. What we call Gen 1s are their parents, so the women who were pregnant and the fathers of the babies. So they're now in their probably late 50s, around about late 50s, 60s, and there's around 3,000 active participants from Generation 1. Also, Generation 1's parents, who are the grandparents of the babies that were born into the study, we've recruited some of them, and they would have been around about their 80s now, and we have data on about 105 grandmothers, but potentially there are about 3,500 Generation Zeros. And then our Generation 2 participants who were babies and who are now approximately 31 years old are having their own children. So we're actually getting up to our Generation 3, which are the new babies being born into the Raine cohort, which is really, really exciting. So now we have about 700. And we also have a really high participant retention rate of around 70-odd%, which is just incredible for a pregnancy cohort that has been running for this long. So it really gives you an understanding of the value that the participants also place on being involved in this study, which is fantastic for all of us researchers in Western Australia and across Australia. So it is a longitudinal life course study. We have followed up the participants from Generation 1 and 2 17 times over the past 31, 32 years. So we have information from pre-birth, so when the Generation 2 was still in the womb, so as Romola noted, at 18 to 34 weeks. Then at birth, so information on their birth weight, their gestational age. Then from infancy, they were followed up ages 1, 2 and 3. In early childhood at ages 5, 8 and 10, in adolescence 14 and 17 years old, and young adulthood, and now into middle adulthood. We have over 30,000 phenotypic points for Generations 1 and 2, 30 million genetic data points for Generations 1 and 2, over 170,000 curated biological samples. And as I mentioned, we've had 17 follow-ups. So it's an incredible resource with a wealth of information. So this slide here it's got a lot of information on it, and we will go into more detail a bit further down the track when we're talking about what data are available. But as you can see along the top, we've got pre-birth up to adulthood, so across the life course, and the types of information down on the left that we have actually collected from our incredible participants. So we've got socio-demographic information, genetics, phenotypic information, including cardiometabolic, respiratory, immunology, behavioural, so sleep, activity, diet, environmental, so the impact of different exposures across the life course, and education and work. So you can see there's a huge range of information that we have collected on our participants, which is going to be of great benefit to all of you. So some of the studies, I mean, we've had over 600 publications now from the Raine study data, which is just absolutely incredible. Romola already mentioned one of the seminal papers, which is really how the Raine study started out, which is looking at the effects of frequent ultrasound during pregnancy, which has really been a real game changer because it showed that actually it is safe to perform frequent ultrasounds when necessary. So it's probably saved countless lives. That's really, really important and incredible. Information, we've had studies looking at the life course adiposity and blood pressure between birth and 17 years. So you can see that looking at participants' weight and adiposity across the life course from early age, actually it has predictive value at a later age. The influence of exposure in the womb prenatally can actually have an influence on females' reproductive development, which is amazing, because, and this is why we have the biological samples that we can actually analyse and we have a lot of data on. Then we've got game-changing research that's just been released, actually. Everyone thinks that neck posture is related to pain, but in actual fact, a recent study just found that it's not. So that's really interesting. Studies looking at epigenetic age acceleration over the life course and the impact that it would have on predictors later in life in terms of risk scores, which is really important for prevention and early intervention. Proximity to liquor stores and adolescent alcohol consumption, that's another really interesting study, which is looking at using geographic information data of where people live and go to school and the proximity to liquor stores, showing that actually being close to liquor stores in early and middle adolescence does actually have an impact on increased alcohol consumption for adolescents. And last but not least, the impact of maternal stress during pregnancy, we know, has an impact on behavioural outcomes for offspring. So meaning that, you know, we really need to support mothers who are pregnant so that we can actually improve the outcomes of their children. So the Raine study is highly successful and rapidly growing. Just last year, in spite of COVID, we still managed to get $3.1 million worth of Category 1 grants. On average, we have 70 new projects every year. We've got over 620 peer-reviewed papers, over 500 active researchers, approximately 300 based in Western Australia. So we're a fantastic family and we are ever growing. So if you want to come and join our family, please do, because we're happy and welcome for you to join us. So what we're going to do now is we're going to have 3 different case studies. The first one, we've got Blagitza, who is our Scientific Support Officer, and she's going to be talking about using the Raine study as a reference population. And then we have Associate Professor Pat Dunlop, who's going to be talking about his research using work-related research. And we also have a video here from Dr. Monique Robinson about how the Raine study has impacted her career. So I will hand over now to Blagitza, who will talk about some of her research. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Rebecca. The case study that I'm presenting is part of a larger NHMRC-funded project led by Professor Roger Hart. It studies the long-term consequences of assisted reproduction, such as in vitro fertilization, upon the development of the offspring. Adolescents born through IVF were invited to participate in a prospective cohort, the Growing Up Healthy study, where a number of their health parameters were investigated, and the Raine study was used as a comparator. The Raine study, it's a very well-established reference population in the relatively isolated and static population of WA, which gave unique opportunity for this project to be feasible, and it cannot be replicated anywhere else in Australia, nor internationally. The project that I was involved in particularly investigated potential epigenetic differences between the cohorts in a cross-sectional study. The DNA methylation signatures of the IVF-born adolescents were compared to their similar age counterparts from Gen 2 at 17-year follow-up, and using them as a reference population for naturally conceived children. The DNA methylation signatures were generated from whole blood using Illumina's methylation platforms, the EPIC array for the IVF-born adolescents, and the 450K array for the Raine study. This gave an opportunity to investigate and compare over 400,000 DNA methylation probes overlapping between the platforms, as well as differentially methylated regions, conducting epigenome-wide association study and testing for an association between the cohorts against the outcome of IVF versus naturally conceived children. We observed no significant differences in the methylation profiles between the cohorts, finding which is of great importance and reassurance to over 8 million children and adults born through IVF, as well as their families and the growing number of couples considering or undergoing IVF treatments. that the longer-term health outcomes of IVF-born children will be no different to the general population in predisposition to health conditions such as cancer, diabetes, or cardiovascular. These reassuring findings could not have been possible if it were not for the available data from the Raine study. Thank you, and I'll give you now back.
Thank you, Blagitza. That's fantastic. Now I'm going to pass you on to Pat Dunlop from Curtin University. Over to you, Pat.
Thanks, Beck. Hi, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to hear more about the wonderful Raine study. So I just wanted to quickly give you an example of an ARC-funded project, just to sort of make the general point that there are many different ways you can fund research into this cohort. So our particular project was a 4-year project. It attracted about 370,000 over those 4 years, and I was working with a team of a good mix of people studying psychology at work and also people studying sort of physical health. Now, most of us in the team are researchers who are interested in studying people in the work context. And so we got involved with the Raine study just at the right time when the Generation 2 cohort that Beck mentioned before was approaching the age where many of us start thinking about our careers, initiating our careers. So we wanted to do 2 things, broadly speaking. One of the things we wanted to do was to use the historical data to look at to examine how individual differences, both in terms of temperament, etc., but also in terms of experiences during early and middle childhood, how those individual differences informed or determined the sorts of work that we ended up pursuing when we were in our early to mid-20s. And then looking forward, we also wanted to collect some new data over the 4-year period where we had the funding to look at how our initial work experiences go on to shape outcomes that are important to us. So, for example, we looked at short-term outcomes such as work performance, but also long-term outcomes such as how does our work design affect our personality and our well-being and our burnout over time. So we used a questionnaire-based approach. You're probably looking at that funding amount thinking, oh, we can't collect many medical samples with that sort of money. But fortunately, the sort of methods we use tends to be more questionnaire-based, which is much lower cost. We also had a PhD student who just finished her PhD last year and a master's student as well. That's pretty much all I wanted to say about that. So I'll pass you back to Beck.
Thanks, Pat. Fantastic. Now I'm going to play a video that Dr. Monique Robinson has kindly recorded for us about how the Raine study has impacted her career and can impact yours.
Hi, I'm Dr. Monique Robinson. I'm a senior research fellow here at Feasibility. I started working in the study back in 2005 as a research assistant. Then I was a Raine study on a 13-year follow-up. And then I moved on to a research officer role and eventually ended up doing my PhD on Raine study data. So I was interested in the antenatal, perinatal, kind of the developmental origins of health and disease area of research, and that really meant that I needed a longitudinal data resource. And fortunately, we have the Raine study here, and it's completely unique and valuable data source. It's something that you don't necessarily find every day in research. So your research that you create from Raine study data will actually end up getting published in really high impact journals, which is so important because it's already there. The data exists, and it's a really easy process to get to access the data. The study has grown a lot, and the processes are just so efficient. So you can quickly move on. You can quickly start to answer your research questions. You can get your publications out. The more publications you get, then the more competitive you are for small grants and ECMI awards. The more awards you get, the
Can you say
or you can travel and go to conferences eventually when we can do those things again. And that allows you to very quickly get to meet others in your field and collaborate, and kind of in a way, I think having this incredible data resource in the Raine study, it really fast tracks your career. At least that's how it felt for me. That I had a research interest, and I just had this incredible wealth of data that I could use to answer those questions. It's a lovely team. It's a real family at the Raine Study, and a lot of the staff on the Raine Study have worked there for many years, so there's a lot of experience. The senior researchers, there's a beautiful community there amongst the senior researchers that you've got those people ready to help and mentor you. So in general, I guess the key is that you need to have longitudinal research questions. That's not necessarily essential, but it's something that makes that Raine Study resource even more valuable because it's something that can't easily be replicated in other survey research. So definitely for me, I think the Raine Study has been a really important part of my career. Thanks.
Okay, now I'm going to pass over to Alex, who is our Data and Biological Samples Manager, and she's going to tell us a bit about the data that we have available. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Dunlop.
Thanks, Beck. I'm Alex, I'm the Data and Biosamples Manager. I help researchers understand and access the Raine Study data from the planning stages to the project proposal and then to the conduct stages. I help researchers identify the Raine Study data that's relevant to their project and assist with identifying the exact variables needed for their data request. So some projects might only need 20 variables and it's quite quickly to find. Other projects will need up to 1,000 variables with a lot more complexity in their project. And so I'm just here to help navigate the data, the Raine data, and assist you with making your data request. On the Raine Study website, we have a For Researchers tab, and under that is the available data page, where you will see all of the available data to you. There are 16 follow-ups available. We've collected 17, but there's only 16 available at the moment. Each follow-up consists of a large questionnaire, a physical assessment, some biological sampling, as well as a diet questionnaire as well. You can view each one of these under the specific follow-up. So we're also working on updating all of our participant questionnaires and physical performers so that their variables is right next to the actual question or the measurement, which will help the researcher easily identify the exact variables they require. So as previously mentioned, Beck mentioned that we have a range of data that we've collected, the socio-demographics, we've collected smoking, medical history, and mental health. These questionnaires are very long and they average about 60 pages, so sometimes it is difficult to find the variables that you need. For example, the Gen 1 and Gen 2 complete variable lists are the best place for you to do a random word search to see if the Raine Study has data for your proposed project. Each variable list presents with variable names and labels for all the follow-ups combined in one large data spreadsheet. I just wanted to clarify here that the Gen 1 participants, which is the parents, completed questionnaires antenatally all the way up to the year 17 follow-up. They completed questions for themselves and for their Gen 2 participant or Gen 2 child. At 14 years of age, or at the 14-year follow-up, our Gen 2 participants actually started completing questionnaires for themselves as well. So there's an overlap between at 14 and 17 where Gen 1 participants completed questionnaires for themselves and for the child, or Gen 2 participant, and the Gen 2 participants completed questions for themselves. And they were specifically adolescent type questionnaires. So we had a huge amount of data collected for those two follow-ups. So for the smoking, I'll just point here. Yeah, you can see with smoking, we've collected at a year 1, year 2, year 3, year 5, year 8. And for these early years, that's the Gen 1 participant completing for themselves and their smoking behaviour or smoking habits. And then here at 14 and then 17 or 16 here, the Gen 2 participants started completing questions about their smoking habits. So having data for the lifelong smoking habits or exposure is very relevant to other comorbidities and other outcomes. Likewise, mental health questions such as the life stress surveys are also collected for Gen 1 participants in the early follow-ups. So you can see here in year 1, 2, 3, 5, 8 and 10, Gen 1 participants completed that for themselves. And then in Gen 2, later down the track, in year 14 follow-up, they started completing questionnaires about their life stress. So experiencing life stress or mental health issues across the lifetime is a risk factor that can also be associated with other outcomes. We also have a separate variable list for physical or clinical measurements. Again, you can search for a keyword such as blood pressure, and you will find it's being collected at year 1, 2, 3, and 5, and all the way across until 28. Also, just wanted to clarify here as well, our physical assessments were always about our Gen 2 participants. All of the measurements are for Gen 2. However, again, at 14 and 17-year follow-ups, we started introducing the parents. So we collected blood pressures and height and weights for the Gen 1 participants at that stage as well. And in Gen 1 26 follow-up, that was a full follow-up just about Gen 1 participants, which included an overnight sleep study. So when you get a chance, have a look through all the variable lists, and when you're ready, we can help you access the data, and Juliana will do that for you.
Good morning, I'm Juliana, I'm the scientific manager of the Raine Study, and myself and Brigitte that you heard from just a bit ago will be probably the first point of contact for you when you want to know anything about how to access the Raine Study resources. So I'm sure you're interested to know how you can get your hands into all these amazing data. So the first step is to visit the For Researchers page on our website, and that will give you all the relevant information you need to know what to expect when being involved with the Raine Study. And we'll tell you about the 4 stages of involvement with us. You can get familiar with the Raine Study Research Engagement Policy. That is a document outlining the expectations for you as a researcher and what you can expect from us as the Raine Study when you want to access our resources. Then you can also visit the available data page on our website that Alex just talked about to have a look at the wealth of data that we have and what can be used to answer your research questions. All of the project activities are managed through the Raine Study Online Submission System, or ROS. So it was a system developed for us, tailored to the Raine Study, to help us manage all the projects related to our Raine Study resources. So you can request a ROS account by emailing us at the Raine Study Science email address, and we can set it up for you so you can start working on your project application in ROS. And when you start creating your project application in ROS, we want you to consider the need for funding. So data or biosamples creation and access fee, or project costs for new data collections. So I'd like to highlight that for those projects that are accessing existing data and they are led by researchers employed by one of our financial partners, normally you have access to all that existing data at no cost. But for those funded projects that might be related to fellowship or grant applications, those that require access to existing biosamples, or those that propose new data collection, you need to talk to us about the need for funding. You also should consider overlap with approved projects. We have all of our publications in our website that you can search for and take a look at. And within ROS, we have a list of approved and completed projects that you can look at to see what has been done in your area of research as well. And we'll also like you to consider collaborations with other Raine Study researchers that are experienced with using the Raine Study data in your area of interest. So that's the first stage of project pre-application, and we are very happy to help you and answer any questions along the way. Using the Raine Study Science email address is the best way to reach us. Stage 2 it's the project application review and approval. So once you created your project application in ROS, you completed all the form and finalize it, you can formally submit it in ROS. All the co-investigators that you listed as part of your team need to confirm involvement into the system, and then the project is going to be formally submitted. Once it's formally submitted, it will be reviewed by the Scientific Management Committee to help you with any questions that you may have, or preparing it for then being reviewed by the Scientific Review Committee, who provides the final approval to your project. Projects can be provisionally approved based on, for example, fellowship or grant applications, or projects involving data creation and access fee, or access to existing biosamples. They will be provisionally approved, and final approval is only provided when the feasibility and acceptability of the planned project is ascertained, and we consider aspects such as finances, current projects, and participant burden, for example, when new data collection is requested. So from formal approval, formal submission within the ROS system to final approval, you can expect a period of 6 to 8 weeks. Stage 3 is project conduct, right? So once your project is approved by the Raine Study, you can seek project-specific ethics approval at your organization's HREC. And once that is provided to us, you can submit a data access or biosample request in ROS. So we ask you to name all data handlers, so all people that are going to be handling the data within the project, and they need to confirm involvement in that as well. So for those projects that involve access to biosamples or new data collection, you'll be working with the Raine Study team to finalize any agreements and protocols that are needed. On a usual access to existing data request, 2 to 6 weeks goes from the data request approval to receiving the data, and that obviously depends on the complexity of the data request and the volume of requests that our data team is working on. While you're conducting your project, any changes that you may want to submit to your project application or data request are all done via ROS by amending your project. And finally, the last stage is project reporting. So once you complete your data analysis, you're thinking about manuscript submissions, you will let us know what your proposal for manuscripts via ROS as well. And once the paper is ready for journal submission, we'll ask you to submit a manuscript submission form in ROS. And all authors will need to confirm involvement and approve the manuscript that you submit to us. So it takes 2 to 3 weeks for manuscript proposal submissions to be approved once they are formally submitted via the system. And once you have your findings published and you would like to involve media releases or promote your project findings, you can also contact our communications manager, and she'll help you with liaising with your organization's media team and make sure that we are promoting your research findings. So now I'll hand it back to Romola to talk to you about the next steps.
Thank you, Juliana and Alex. So I hope you can see that this is an exciting opportunity for you to get involved in research with considerable impact. It's our intention to continue the Raine Study indefinitely. Well, if we can keep the generations coming, it could be indefinite. Our current Gen 2 participants are in their 30s. I'd love to be able to continue assessing them, getting them back in for follow-up into their 40s, 50s, 60s, and so on. Their parents are already in their 70s and 80s. And for somebody who asked the question about, do you have a planned follow-up to look at dementia? Not yet, but if that's something you'd like to talk to us about, we would welcome the opportunity to talk to you about that as a future study. What I can also reveal to you now is that starting in 2023, we have planned a major follow-up of Gen 1 and Gen 2. That follow-up will include as many of our participants as we possibly can. But it's a great opportunity, because that's going to be a core follow-up, to apply for grant funding to add additional assessments that aren't part of a core follow-up but complement it well, to leverage the value of the follow-up that's already happening. And we will be looking forward to talking to researchers about that opportunity over the coming year. We're particularly keen to encourage studies on a broad range of health and social issues that use the strengths of the Raine study, those longitudinal data over more than 30 years, the multi-domain nature and the multi-generational nature of the Raine study. It truly is an international treasure, this study. So we encourage you to consider joining the Raine study research community and bringing your students with you. Over the years, the Raine study has supported hundreds and hundreds of students, and it's more than 30 years. We have 66 student projects in 2020 alone, 36 of those were PhD students, 20 masters. And those PhD students are in UWA, Telephone Kids Institute, they're enrolled in Curtin, ECU, Murdoch, and in other states, even internationally. We have, however, the capacity for many more. So it's a great opportunity to get involved in the Raine study through a PhD or other student supervision. So what next? We're hoping that you're excited by the prospect of how you might become involved in the Raine study. So we'd like you to check out the Raine study website if you are interested in working with us. Please, 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 I can't say this often enough, read the research engagement policy. There's a direct bit.ly link there if you want to go and look at it. It's really important to understand, as Juliana has indicated, how we work with you and how you work with us. Set up a Raine study account by emailing the Raine study science team. Create a project application via ROS, our Research Online submission system. And talk with us about that planned 2023 follow-up. You may feel that this session has given you enough information, and hopefully with the Q&A a bit more, to just get going. But you may also want a bit more help with it. So I can tell you, and this is a new, I was going to say, you're the first to hear about this because I'm really targeting this at you, the people who attended the webinar today. We are offering, unfortunately for people based in Perth only, a facilitated workshop for a small number of people. We have 30 spaces on the 23rd of June at the QE2 Medical Campus. It's a free workshop. There's a bit.ly link there. You can register your expression of interest. We're really, really keen to have people to come along to that workshop who are very serious about getting started with the Raine study now, either using our retrospective, our historical data, and or thinking about working with us on the 2023 follow-up. But be warned, the closing date for the EOI, given that the workshop is on the 23rd of June, so it's very soon, the closing date is the 31st of May, so get in quick with your expressions of interest. So it is really important to me to recognise that the Raine study hasn't been funded just by the Raine Medical Research Foundation, albeit they are our longest standing contributors over its 30-year history. It's also funded by our partners, who I'm showing here, University of Western Australia, Curtin, ECU, Murdoch, Notre Dame, the Telephone Kids Institute, and the Women's and Infants Research Foundation. What we've got time for now is some questions, and I'm glad to see that there are quite a few questions showing up on the Q&A. So we're going to take some of those now. Hold on a sec, stop sharing. Lovely, all right. So can the team please come and squish in behind me? I'm hoping you can see them. Oh. Nope, Juliana, you're not there. I'm going to push the screen away. This is yeah. Okay, lovely. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, so I had a question that's obviously been upvoted quite a lot. Thank you, Katrina Fife, about whether we would be planning to work in the dementia space. I hope I've answered that, Katrina. We're open to that idea. Because we're recruiting Gen 1 and we have the possibility of bringing in some of the Gen 0, the grandparents, I think there's a great opportunity there. And I'm really keen in future longitudinal studies of Gen 2 into the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, continuing to look at their performance and their activities of daily living and their well-being, because then we'll be able to look at early life predictors from childhood, from pre-birth, all the way through childhood, adolescence, young adulthood, into later life disorders like dementia. And I think that's one of the really important capacities, if you like, the unique capacities that the Raine study offers. So, cancer patients, do we know the answer to that one?
We don't have many cancer patients at all.
Say it a bit louder.
So we don't, with our Gen 2 participants, we only have just a handful of cancer patients. And Gen 1, we have started collecting for the Gen 1 26 follow-up. So there are a few cancer participants there, but we haven't collected. I think the other was 4 generations of Raine cohort, across 4 generations of Raine cohort. So we've got some for Gen 1 cohort. I can't give you the numbers at the moment.
However, we are hoping to link at least 3 generations to the administrative health data sets, and there is a cancer registry there. So if we are successful with that grant application, then we will have access to a lot more information on that. So we'll keep you up to date with that.
Yeah, that's a really good question.
Yeah, in terms of chaplains,
Yeah, about biological diversity. Yeah. Sorry. I'm sorry. I
Just
can't
in the
look.
chat.
I'm looking in the chat. Sorry,
So it's
folks.
just above this one. So I can answer the question from Barbara about levels of diversity in our cohort. So you will see that we have some protocol and profile papers for our cohort for both Gen 1 and Gen 2, and it shows comparison to the general Australian population, and we have quite good comparison there, highlighting that most of our sample is Caucasian, which goes in line with the general population data as well.
I'll deal with this one. So there's an opportunity, says Mark, to add on biological sampling prospectively. Yes, is the answer. We will be collecting biological samples as part of our core 2023 follow-up. So again, that's something to talk to us about. If you have particular interest there, we will definitely be doing that. We'll be taking blood and urine samples. Okay. So Jonathan's asked, are the Raine data linked with participant hospital attendance and or diagnostic coding?
Not yet, but hopefully soon.
We do have ICD-9 codes with our data that we've collected throughout the years, but it's not linked with the Department of Health yet.
Right. So
It's in progress, hopefully.
So yes to the diagnostic coding, ICD-10, no to the hospital attendance, not yet, but it's something we're working on.
But it has a patient-reported, participant-reported hospital attendance.
Thank you for clarifying. Okay, lovely. Groups working on oral health?
And not at the moment. We have collected some data on oral health, but we don't have anyone actively working there at the moment.
So
You're welcome.
Come and talk to us.
come and talk to us. Yes, we'd like to have groups working on oral health. Okay, we've done that one. Executive functions, working memory inhibition. So we have got some cognitive function data. We used the Cogstate, thank you. I was about to say the wrong one. The Cogstate. And so we have some measures of attention, memory. I would not say that we have very good measures of executive function, although we have some limited data. So again, check out the data on the website, because the cognitive data are all listed and you can see which subtests we used. And hopefully that will answer your question for you, but if it doesn't, come back to us. Okay. Sorry. Will anybody be able to guide us regarding feasibility? Right, so I apologise if I get this wrong. Revathi has asked, said the Raine study is amazing. Thank you, we absolutely agree with you. We think it's amazing too. Will anybody be able to guide us regarding feasibility if we have a specific project in mind?
Definitely. So both myself and Alex, as the data and biosamples manager, will be able to talk to you about what data is available and how feasible your project is, and if you can use our resources to answer your research question. So emailing us at the Raine Study Science email address is the best way.
Sorry, folks, we're just scanning down the Q&A. Okay. This thing, I hate this thing. Sorry, folks, give me a moment. We're just going to clear this up so we can see your questions. Just bear with us, please.
Someone said that the email has an...
That's right, we've got that. We've corrected it.
Corrected it?
Yeah. Internet addiction and internet gaming disorder, says Mubarak. I'm keen to join a Raine Study team, would like to know the scope.
We do have data on technology use, and we've collected that over the last few follow-ups with regards to how many hours they spend on gaming, or as well as just using computer or internet, but not specifically addiction.
You don't have specific measures of internet addiction. We do have some measures of exposure to technology use. But we're always happy to talk to you about potentially looking at including questions in the new follow-up that we are planning.
So thank you. Sharon says she's interested in the early feeding skills of infants and long-term impact on safe feeding behaviours. Do we have any feeding data on?
Absolutely. We have a lot of breastfeeding as well as normal feeding, so bottle feeding, and just diet in general for infants between 1 and 3. And yes, so we do have actually Wendy Oddie is one of our main researchers who's published quite a lot of work already in that area. So have a look at her work. That's on our website as well, and you can go from there.
So Deborah has talked about obesity having a huge impact on Australians and then risk factors. I'm wondering if we have done any work on the link between early life characteristics, birth weight and obesity risk in later life. So the answer is yes, there are quite a lot of publications about that.
Yes, we have publications on the trajectory of BMI across childhood and adolescence, and there's a lot of projects that have been conducted, but there's always room for further research in the area.
And Yvonne has asked, what data do we have available on sleep? We conducted overnight PSG study on Gen 1.
Yes, we've collected a PSG study on Gen 1 and a PSG study on Gen 2 when they were 22 years of age. So, and then in between those follow-ups, we've collected questions on sleep.
So we have a lot of measures on sleep quality and sleepiness.
Yes.
Irritable, not irritable, sorry. The legs.
Restless leg syndrome.
Irritable leg syndrome. So we do have both objective and subjective data.
And we've collected activity data for 8 days overnight.
Okay. Are we still recruiting Gen 1, says Barbara, or is that all done? In the sense that our Generation 1 are the parents of Gen 2, they are recruited, but how many of them are available to come back at any follow-up depends on whether they've moved out of state or whether they're still interested. And our numbers that we actually manage to assess on any particular follow-up vary depending on people's availability and interest. But we get people who go away for a follow-up and come back for the next follow-up. But we have how many parents all up are potentially available? 3,000, yeah. Okay, sorry. Thank you, lovely. It's lovely. I think there was just one other. Will we obtain a cost estimate, says Blake, for accessing data when we create a ROS account?
Not automatically when you create a ROS account, but when you talk to us, to the scientific management team, about what your idea is and what you would like to access, yes, we can talk to you about need for funding.
And Esther's asking, are there any baseline and follow-up data on preterm infants?
We definitely have information about their gestational age and their birth, and then obviously the longitudinal data. So you can always look at the available data and talk to us about what we have available and that can address your research questions.
Mariam is asking about, is the sleep data of Gen 1 collected at the pregnancy time? No. And is there any data of daily sun exposure in pregnancy? I believe there might be.
Yes, I think there is for sun exposure during pregnancy. Sleep was collected at Gen 126, so roughly when the Gen 1 participants were about 56 years of age. That's when we collected the sleep study.
So I'm going to take one more question and then I think we should probably wrap up, unless there are a couple of others that are most pressing. So Joey Lee says, for all your thousands of samples, what types of samples are they? That's a big question.
So the thousands comes from the 17 years of follow-ups, and each follow-up we collect between maybe 1,000 and 1,400 samples, depending on how many participants participated. Also, Gen 2, for example, the year 14 follow-up, the Gen 2 participants, there were 1,400 participants we collected blood samples for, and then that multiplies for their Gen 1 parents who also collected samples for them. We have plasma, we have serum, we have urine, saliva, DNA, sorry. So those are all multiple samples, and so that adds up quite quickly to thousands of samples.
Okay, we've probably got time for two quick ones more. Sharon said, any questions, any data about surgeries during infancy or childhood, for example, tongue tie?
Oh, we do collect any medical admissions throughout their whole life. So if that did happen and they reported it to us, we've collected it, but it's just patient reported.
The same goes to, do you have any data on prescription and over-the-counter medication for different generations? Yes, we do, and that's participant reported, but hopefully with the linkage data, we'll have a lot more information about medication use and surgeries and hospital visits.
And everybody else about hypertension data? Yes, we do. We have hypertension data out the wazoo, as they say. No, I shouldn't say that. Okay, I think, let me just have a little check. Over the counter prescription medication, we've done that one. Thank you very much. Keeping track of this is more than my... Right, on epigenetics, do we have histone modification data or only DNA methylation?
No, just DNA methylation, and there's a whole epigenome association study that is available to be done. So their epigenomes and are done, like, able to compare. The DNA data can be used, and I think the data is available on GWAS. So it's the genome-wide association study and the epigenome-wide association study. So no histone modification data available, unfortunately.
Okay.
But it can be done.
All right. So listen, everyone, I just wanted to, I'm going to draw this to a close. There are some very particular, specific questions coming, and I encourage you now to contact the Raine Study team. As you can see, they're immensely helpful and supportive. You can't quite see all of them. I'm sorry about that. Lean in, folks. Please do two things for me. One, fill in the poll again. So I'm interested to know whether your answers have changed. It's coming up now. And two, I know we can't see you, but I want you to join me in thanking today's speakers. I'm Beck. She's there. Juliana, Alex, Ligitza, Pat, who's somewhere hiding. There you go. Thank you, Pat. And Monique, who made the wonderful video for us. Thank you for your interest today, for giving up some of your precious time this morning, and we look forward to hearing from you.